Good evening, everybody. It must be Thursday at 5:30. We're live here from SEC TV. I'm really excited again tonight, and I know you guys say that watch my show that you always say you're excited, but it's campaign season, and it's just not any campaign. We all know about the big election that's coming up in November. We hear about it every day on the radio. We know the governor's race is up. We know there's some huge changes that could come depending on what happens in an election. Hopefully, it goes the way that you know the way I want it to go. But we have a primary coming up. That's right around the corner, August 9th. It's 2 weeks away. 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of actually interviewing our hopefully next Secretary of State. And tonight is no different. We have somebody that's primarying. She will be on row B. Dita Bhargava.
Bhargava.
Yep, yes, sorry about that. She came all the way down from the other side of the state again. We know that 95 is not the easiest, best track, but I'm really, really happy that you came down. I've endorsed you already multiple times. I've gone on Facebook and said my piece. I've met you early, and the show basically, Born Political, was more about who the people are and not what seat they were running for. We morphed a little bit, but we are going to get into who you are, because I think it's important that, especially in Eastern Connecticut, they may not know who you are. Like, again, you're the other side of the state.
Right.
So Dita, thank you for coming on the show, first of all.
Thank you.
And who's Dita? Where are you from?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Joey, for bringing me here. I love this part of the state. I love Eastern Connecticut. As you know, I've been here many, many times
Yes.
over the years. And I'm so honored to have your support and to be on this show. And thank you for doing what you do here and bringing people on and talking about issues that are so important to the folks in Eastern Connecticut. So I'm Dita Bhargava, and I'm running for the office of State Treasurer because I really believe in our state, in our future, and the people of our state. And that really comes from just living in the state since 2008 and having both my kids be born in Connecticut. I knew there was no better place for us to raise our children. But I'm also very committed to empowering our communities. And that was born out of the way that I was raised. My mom was a single immigrant parent, and watching her struggle, providing us with basic needs, that really impacted my life. And she's a strong woman, and to this day, she reminds us of three things, which is to work hard, dream big, and never forget where we came from. Yeah. And so I feel very fortunate, despite our economic circumstances. I actually was born and raised in Canada, and we had access to high quality education. We had access to health care, and that was all the cushion that my sisters and I needed to be able to dream about reaching our full potential. So I feel very fortunate about the opportunities that I was able to tap into, but equally passionate that I should use what I've learned to empower and lift people across the state. And that's why I'm running for office, essentially, is to help make that impact in our beautiful state.
Well, that's why you have my vote, for multiple reasons. But a lot, I think, the passion that one brings to their job, a lot has to do with mom. And yeah. I've interviewed a bunch of people now over the last 6-8 months. And mom gets brought up a lot. And it's not
and
to
you
say...
said your mom was the first person on this show ever, right?
I interviewed my mom. She was the very first interview. Yeah. Because when you think about the person that impacts you, the person that knows you the longest. Because no matter what anybody wants to claim about how long they've known Dita, your mom's known you for 9 months more.
Right, that's true. Always more.
Yeah, always more, and right. Always the tie is always stronger. Right. So to hear where you get all your passion from, I understand where you're coming from, because I come from the same place. Now you have a family, because you're brothers and sisters. How big's the family? How many?
Yeah, so I have 2 sisters, and then I have 3 children. One oldest daughter who's 27, and then I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. And as you know, Joe, we had our oldest passed away 4 years ago to an unfortunate accidental overdose. Actually, I call it poisoning, because he inadvertently had fentanyl in his drug and died, which was tragic on so many levels, but what we had a tough time coming to terms with was he was doing so tremendously well at that time. And the disease of addiction it's an insidious disease, but he was more committed and wanted nothing more than to lead a spiritually fulfilling life with the love of his family and his friends. And it was his birthday. He had just turned 26, and he did suffer from a mild bipolar disease and depression. Talked about two voices in his head, and that one voice got the better of him that night. And unfortunately, because of the fentanyl, it was the last chance he ever had. So, since then, I've been out there, as you know, just like you have, advocating for better prevention, treatment, and recovery in our state, but really focusing on the stigma part of it. 3 weeks before Alec passed away, I feel blessed that he left me with a rallying cry, because he had said, I had asked him, because I was campaigning at that time, and he died just a few weeks before the primary, and I asked him, if anybody asks me about his disease, how he would want me to address it. And he said, look, you wouldn't be asking me this question if I had cancer. I have a disease, my friends have died of this disease, and people they think it's our fault. And it's not our fault. And you need to get out there and talk about it to erase that stigma so that treatment can be accessible. Because we had a lot of trouble accessing treatment, proper treatment and affordable treatment, as many do in our state. So I got out there. When he passed away, I knew exactly that I had to tell his story, because he asked me to, and created roundtables. I worked on passing legislation with you and so many great legislators in our state. I particularly went after Purdue Pharma, who, in their role in the opioid epidemic.
A Connecticut company.
A Connecticut, Stamford-based company, because they lied straight through their teeth in the 1990s and beyond. They lied. They knew exactly what the addictive nature of their drug was, and they knew exactly who they were going after, which was the most vulnerable. And all for the name of money and greed. So to me, it's so important if we can, jump a little bit as to why I'm running, and why I'm particularly running for the state treasurer's offices. And we can talk about my experience, my financial experience, in a minute. But in my heart, I know that I can make a difference through that office when it comes to corporate responsibility, because so many times in our state, in our country, in our communities, issues are started by greed of big corporations. And certainly it was with big pharmaceuticals. 1 million people have died in our country since Purdue Pharma introduced OxyContin and didn't tell us, lied through their teeth about the addictive nature. And so I plan to work with companies that Connecticut is invested in to make sure that they are doing the right thing by society, that they're not guided by greed, that they have a moral compass. Because, Joe, it's not only the right thing to do, it's smart investment. If the state had money in Purdue Pharma, that would have done very, very poorly, because they're bankrupt because of the lies and the lawsuits. So companies that don't do the right thing, they are liable to lawsuits, they're liable to reputational risk, and they're not a good investment for Connecticut. And when we have a seat at the table, because we have $45 billion of pension assets, and then if we then partner with other treasuries across the country, that's trillions of dollars, we can really get them where it matters, which is their wallets.
The only language that large business understands is the financial language.
Yes.
And so what I think most folks don't understand is, when you're the treasurer, you are literally speaking their language.
Right.
I think when we go there with I have the passion about the issue with the opiate crisis. Obviously, we talked about our moms being the same and drawing power from them, but we've also had a very similar experience. I lost my son at 24. We know how devastating that could be. We also know the inspiration that they can give us.
Yes.
And our inspiration to do the work that we've done came from my son, and the fact, and you speak the same way I do. Yeah. And I really have this connection to you that my wife also has, by the way, when we first met you, because we understood that if we're going to have somebody in an office, especially this office in particular, when we're dealing with what we think is the biggest injustice that's happened in our country, I'm sure there's a lot of things that happen, but for it to happen the way it happened, the way you just described it, and most folks, if you said that this one person killed 1 million people, and you could put a face on somebody, the actual passion you'd see on the streets and the pitchforks with the lanterns, you'd see that.
Yes.
The reason you don't see it so much, I think, with Purdue is because they do it through a financial language,
Yeah.
through bills that made them allow them to sell more pills to more people that didn't actually need them, to lower the age that made it more accessible for younger kids, to do all the things that they knew in the middle of the epidemic, to still continue to make it easier for folks to get. When you say that you want to speak to them in their language, that gets me excited. Because somebody that has, first of all, your experience and knowledge, you know how to pull levers that someone like me and my wife wouldn't know. We understand that we have passion, but we're the ones that be standing in front of the building screaming and yelling. You're going to make them hurt financially. You can take investment away.
Yes. Yes, yes, and again, because it's the right fiduciary responsibility thing to do as well. We don't want our pensioners to be invested in companies that may no longer exist at some point because of the bad act that they may be engaging in because they're guided by greed. And if you think, recently, Joe, you may have seen my ad on pro-abortion, and it's a very raw ad.
I did see it.
Yes, and it's powerful, and it's it's raw, but this is a very, very unprecedented time in our country where literally 50 years of rights have been stripped away, and that's what I try and show in that ad. Visualize where women are just shoulder up bare because their rights have been stripped away. Well, Hulu decided, which is owned by Walt Disney Company, that's the parent company, they told us we're not going to play your ad because we're not playing any ads on abortion, on pro-abortion ads, and that did not sit right with me. No. Why would you not play pro-abortion ad? And I looked at their company policy. Well, they gave me their company policy, but then I did some more research, and I found out that actually Walt Disney back in 2011 said that they are guided, their fundamental principles are guided by United Nations principles on human rights. And United Nations last month in June had announced that abortion rights are women rights and human rights. So I wrote to them and I said, this doesn't align with your principles that you have actually stated from 11 years ago. 2 days later, they reversed their decision. And a week later, they made a blanket reversal just yesterday for all abortion ads across the country. And we were at the forefront of that. And that's a small example of the type of tenacity and negotiation that I will bring to the Treasury's office. I'm not there to just cut business with businesses. I'm there because with a seat at the table, we can actually influence. As soon as you say, I'm divesting, I'm leaving, then we lose that seat at the table where we can influence policy for the entire country, for our communities, for the world. So to me, it's much better we create that partnership, we reason with them, we get them on the right side of an issue, and then they're a good investment, and we can continue to guide them to do the right thing.
And that was not financial language, by the way.
Yeah.
That was you digging into to something that I'm sure at some point a board got together and they had their big meeting and figured out what their mission was and what their values were.
Right.
And you just went in and found that it wasn't in line with the values that they even put down.
Right.
And the values of a stockholder or of a company that's trying to make money and pay dividends is always going back to the stockholder. And here's the funny thing, now that you mentioned it, when you would be in control now at this point of these massive amounts of investments in pension retirement funds, that's what the treasurer would that's your main duty, I would say, is fiduciary responsibility of the state.
Right.
We have folks, and especially this disease that we talk about and the people they actually attacked were mostly folks with insurance.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going after people that didn't have access to prescriptions.
Right.
They went after people who do, and guess what?
Right.
State workers, by a large majority, were being affected in a different way than folks that didn't have insurance, because if your kid was getting their wisdom teeth out at 13 years old, and you went in with your state insurance that you work for, you're better believe that you're going to get those prescribed to you because there was a source that was going to pay for them.
Right.
So these folks that have this a large part of their life, their pension, is being invested in a really, really tough way when you think about that the company they've invested in possibly is the same company that hooked their kids.
Yes.
And the funny thing is, when it becomes intricate and it's hard to understand,
Yeah.
people don't have the anger.
Right. Right.
And that's why, because we've been doing these meetings and going to schools, and I'm like, at some point, like this anger is just going to boil over and people are going to be upset. But it's when you don't know what you're supposed to be angry at is when it's difficult.
Right, and it's convoluted, right? Because there's so many layers, and you know, Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family, they did a good job of just playing the good guy. You know, they sat on all these boards. They were huge supporters of a lot of good. You know, and it was all a cover up at the whole time. But you're right. You know, over 80% of people who become addicted are through prescription painkillers. So they stop. They start with painkillers, whether it's the 13-year-olds or whether it's the seniors who, you know, have a bad elbow or a knee that hurts. And they knew this, you know, and they lied to the doctors, and they held doctors up against the wall as to, you know, you've got to prescribe more medicines, or we're not, you know, the insurance companies were involved, and they would say, we're not going to pay for insurance if this person keeps coming back for a bad knee. I mean, the whole thing was just so awful in terms of how many layers.
They did it through legislation.
Yes.
When you looked and followed, I mean, it really, this has been my life for 7 years. One of the big reasons I ran, I knew when I first ran that I didn't have time to do it.
Yeah.
I had to ask my boss if she would let me run.
Yeah.
And she knew why I wanted to run and how much passion I had for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason she told me to go ahead and run. But to see how this all developed from back in the 90s when, you know, you couldn't have went to any senator in the 70s and 80s and said, you know, heroin's not the same heroin. They had seen what it did in Korea. They had seen, we've been through this a couple times.
Yes.
So when they went to the older senators and Congress people, they said, well, we remember. And it wasn't a good time in the 60s after Vietnam or after Korea. It wasn't a good time, the morphine that they did after World War II. These folks remembered that. There was this gap in time where they kind of forgot, and then they were led to believe, you know, through payment and having doctors and medical boards say that this is a wonder drug. It's not addictive.
Right.
And to over and over say it.
Yes.
And then to, even in the middle of the pandemic, lower the age from being able to be 15 down to 11.
Right.
And my point in all the meetings that we run at Community Speaks Out were basically, okay, either we're the luckiest set of group of folks, I mean the unluckiest set of folks on the planet, and we landed on a patch of land that holds 5% of the world's population, yet we take 85% of the world's prescription drugs, of prescription opiates.
Right.
And really, if you were a 13-year-old kid in Italy or Germany or South Africa or almost any other place on the planet, and you went in for your wisdom teeth, the first choice for a doctor is not the nuclear option. We say the nuclear option is, listen, if the pain is so great, but we want you to start with ibuprofen like they would in Italy.
Yes.
So unless we live on a part of the planet that suffers from pain more than every other part of the world, and I don't think that's true, and I don't think you do either, because they don't do it in Canada.
This was manufactured.
It was.
Yes, it was so many, and that's why it's so complicated. Your point as to who do you get mad at? There's been so many layers of built together over years, and whether that's big corporations, insurance companies, doctors, legislators, you know, it's just been this perfect storm of what has happened, and 1 million people have died in our country because of it.
I think it actually has led to the distrust that many folks have in government and doctors, and you know, because I think people, they just discount or forget that someone that lost a son or daughter that now knows the truth and sees many documentaries that explain the same thing me and you were talking about. It's not like we didn't discover this all ourselves.
Yeah.
We read articles and we went to shows and movies and understood it.
Right.
Watched 60 Minutes.
Yes.
They call me the old guy at work because I watch 60 Minutes. So it's an old person show.
Old school.
I guess. But so now that they're educated and they understand what happened, it's almost when a doctor tells them something and they kind of doubt it. Or if, you know, the vaccine rollout happened and people are like, well, I don't know, they didn't. They also said that, you know, they said, Joe, you've been saying that the doctors were saying that it's not addictive, and here now all of a sudden you want me to believe them.
Right.
It makes our case difficult.
Yes.
When we have good things like a vaccine, when something comes out that's positive for mankind, that's something that's going to help us.
Right.
It's hard to explain that away when
there's not the trust. Yes, because it's been, you know, the trust has been undermined for so many years, and something just so tragic. And yeah, no, absolutely. So that's been my guiding light in terms of running for the state treasurer is to that corporate governance piece is just so important in the state treasurer's office because essentially you are investing and you have the ability to make an impact. But I also then of course bring the 25 years of actual investment management experience, and that's very important, Joe. As you know, our retirees are counting on what's been promised to them. And I often say, well, you wouldn't go to a barber to get a root canal. You want to take, if you have all your savings in a bag and you walk into a room and one person actually has the experience, has years and years of actual returns on investment, has a proven track record, and the other one doesn't or doesn't have any at all or very little, where are you planting your life savings? And so I know I'm ready on day one to maximize those returns, especially right now when we're in this very precarious economic time. The inflation rates are at 40-year highs. It's a new economic paradigm. We feel it because when we go to the gas station, it's expensive to fill our car. When we go grocery shopping, it's expensive. Rents are high. So we feel it. And similarly in the Treasury's office, if we don't have someone in there who's managing those pension funds, maximizing the returns, especially during this inflationary time, then we're going to be in trouble in terms of making sure we're putting enough into, having to put more into that out of the state coffers, and that means less money for schools, for bridges, for social services that we desperately need in our state. So it can't be a learning curve. The person has to be ready, and I know I'm ready on day one.
And you have to be a registered Democrat to participate. I mean, and people say, oh, I hate when people say that, but this is the truth. Our party system works this way.
It's a closed party system.
It's a closed party system, and if you're a registered Democrat on August 9th, you can go out and make a difference. I think for me, before I even went to Harvard, I said, it's the treasurer. It's the Secretary of State. Positions I thought, although I knew they were important, I think when most people think of a treasurer, they're thinking of someone who's just keeping track of the books.
Right.
The discussion that we had, and just two quick examples that you talked about tonight, whether it's opiate or whether it was women's health care, how a treasurer can actually affect those things. And I really know people don't understand how it's all connected, but it couldn't be more connected.
Yes, and it's so connected. And you were talking about how people pay attention to November and the gubernatorial race and the Senate race. Arguably, and people have said this, the treasurer's role is just as important as the governor's role because the treasurer manages all of our investments and is essentially the chief financial officer of the state. So if it's not managed properly, then what happens is the state doesn't do well financially, and then taxes could potentially go up for everybody. So it matters to everyone that we keep our state fiscally and financially strong, and a lot of that has to do with how the treasurer manages our $45 billion of pension assets. It's a big, big job, and it's a high, and these are Governor Lamont's words actually. He, on the onset, said it's a highly specialized job, which means you have to have the right skill set to manage that office.
And it has to be incorporated with morals.
Yes.
Because a lot of folks that I know numbers and they've done financial work their whole entire life.
Right.
But you have to have a personality where you realize what levers move which what buttons move which levers, and you only gain that in life experience. You only gain that with time. And I know there's other folks that want the seat, and I just think that your experience has brought you to a point where you're just the best candidate. And that's how I don't always endorse the person that was the endorsed candidate by the party,
right?
Because oftentimes they don't have the full picture of the person.
Yes.
And I actually have gotten to have that with you. And
no,
maybe it's the advantage I have over most people. These people that will watch my show, and I'm going to put it'll be on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter. We put it out there. I hope people take the time to watch this because I can't tell you how impressed I am with I call it the political chops that you've earned just through your life experience. Because you don't have to be a politician to understand how things move and how to get folks to do things that are right. And it's funny how corporations jump on board when folks stop buying their things. The simplest move, the most power that a consumer can have, and say, you know what, I'm not buying those shoes. I'm telling all my friends not to buy those shoes because I don't like what XYZ company did. just you're that times the 3.5 million people
Right.
if you get elected.
Yeah.
That would be, you'd be the voice of 3.5 million people.
Right.
So when you say, does the treasurer matter, they are speaking for you like I spoke for you these last 6 years. So I mean, I couldn't be more excited. I know.
Oh, I appreciate it. And to your point, look, the treasurer has a lot more capability to affect social progress through those offices. There's the financial literacy program. To me, it's so important that we educate not just the young, but our seniors as well, and everybody in between. So I had my first bank account when I was 8 years old, and I shared it with my 6-year-old sister, and I had this little ledger, and I learned how to balance my, and I was a big saver. But those skills I think need to start early. And so and then the CHET program, to start saving for our children. 68% of adults have no idea there's anything like a 529 or CHET program. The CHET program helps parents put aside money so that when their children are of age, they have the opportunity to go to university or college without going broke and having huge amounts of debt. So important. Partnering with the Green Bank to make sure we are doing green infrastructure projects in the state of Connecticut and multiplying that partnership, through private sector and nonprofit to make, Connecticut a greener and create a lot of jobs in the process. And the baby bonds program that current treasurer Wooden introduced. I'm such a believer in equalizing those opportunities, especially coming from where I came from and having the opportunity for education and for healthcare. To me, it's so important that we empower and lift our young. And you talked about a primary, and you talked about how not always the endorsed candidate, is necessarily the best choice. I think primaries are such a healthy process of democracy, especially right now when Republicans are trying to undermine democracy. It is so important as Democrats, we have everybody in our state have a voice. And so having every Democrat have the opportunity to hear us all out and pick the one that most resonates with them is so important. And it also prepares the primary candidate for the general in November. So to me, part of democracy is a healthy primary. We've had some great candidates who came out as unendorsed. Johanna Hayes, our great congresswoman, Lieutenant Governor Bysewicz in 1998, who became the Secretary of State. So, I think primaries are a very healthy process of democracy. I'm going to say we need more women in office.
Well, I think everybody says that
Yeah.
and doesn't necessarily know how to mean it, because I was up in there. And I actually see if you are 52% of the population, which you are,
Right.
There's more women than there are men.
Why is there only 30% of elected leaders are
Exactly.
women? And that's why you get 4 men and a woman who ultimately say, this is what you need to do with your uterus. Why don't the men talk about their own body parts? So we need equality in voice and representation, because the men don't necessarily understand how invasive and what an attack that is on a woman to be told what to do with their uterus. Then that's the bottom line. How dare, So to me, it's the representation, diversity always makes us stronger. So having diverse voice, and absolutely when we have 51, 52% of the population being women, we should have that much in office.
It's not reflective at all. It hasn't been. It's certainly not reflective in Congress. I think our state is, we do have a lot of women that have, to me, they're in positions, but statewide offices is not really a lot. And I think, and definitely your perspective on all these issues is something that's needed. It's something that we have to have. I told you the show was going to go fast.
Yes.
We're already down to like 10 seconds, I think.
Yes. Well, August 9th,
Yep.
I'll be on line B. Please vote for me. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Vote with him. He knows. Joey knows what's best. So
All
line
right,
B,
guys.
August 9th.
Next
Thank you
week
so
we'll
much.
see you. Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
coming down.
Thank
Great
you.
show. It was great having you.
Yes,
Really
this was
was.
awesome.
Thank you. That was great.